Hello, everyone, and happy Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, the EDGE User Group Monthly Update, the April 2021 edition. Just a couple of housekeeping items while everyone gets settled. We are using the Zoom webinar platform for today's webinar, so your mics and cameras are disabled by default. If you have any technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat function and select all panelists, and we will work with you directly to sort it out. If at any time during the webinar you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function. Please note that we will be holding questions until after the presentation. And with that, I would like to turn it over to ACRO's Deputy Director, Melanie Gottlieb.
Good afternoon. I'm Melanie Gottlieb, Deputy Director of ACRO, and I'd like to welcome you to this month's user group. It's a pleasure to be online with all of you today. As always, we're hopeful that our technology will not fail us, as this is a fairly large Zoom call and all of us, like many of you, are still working from home at the mercy of our home Wi-Fi. The purpose of our user group is to share news and updates that are related to EDGE and to allow our user community to connect with us and with each other. With me today is my colleague, Jasmine Saidi Kunert. Jasmine is the founder and president of ACEI, Academic Credentials Evaluation Institute, based in Los Angeles, and she is also the chair of our IESC, International Evaluation Standards Council. Before we turn to our panelists, I would like to find out a little bit more about who is in the audience. So I'm going to launch a poll, and if you could take a few moments to answer that, it would be great. So first, I'm asking, what segment of our EDGE population do you represent? Are you institutional staff, evaluation service staff, government staff, or law firm staff? Is this your first user group, or are you a repeat user group member? And are you an EDGE subscriber? So we will give it another maybe 10 seconds, because it looks like most people have gone ahead, and I'm going to end the polling. And it looks like, as usual, that the majority of folks here are institutional staff, although we have a few of our service colleagues with us. We have about 32%, a third of you. It's your first user group. And most of you are EDGE subscribers, although there are 6% of you are not. So if any of you who are not EDGE subscribers are interested in checking out EDGE, please reach out to us and we will be happy to give you a trial. All right. And now I would like to turn the mic over to Jasmine.
Thank you, Melanie. Well, hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with everyone here today. Again, I'm Jasmine Saidi Kunert, and I'm currently serving as chair of the IESC, and it has been just a joy to be part of this group. I've reunited with a lot of colleagues that I've pretty much grown up with in this field, and new members. So it's a delight to be part of this wonderful group of peers. Joining me today on the panel are two of my colleagues on the IESC. We have Nancy Katz from the Evaluation Services in Chicago, and we have Robert Watkins, who's with the University of Texas at Austin. Just a quick review of what the role of IESC is. We are a group of volunteers, and all of us represent whether either public or private institutions of higher ed, or we are with private credential evaluation agencies. All of us have been involved in this field for many years and contributed to various publications, authored research projects relevant to the field of international ed, comparative education, country studies, and so forth. So it is just a delight for us to be part of the IESC, where we can bring together this experience that we have amassed over the years and share it with you, those of you who are subscribers to EDGE, which is such a valuable resource. I cannot praise it enough. And our role is to review the country profiles and the credentials and the grading scales and address the questions that are presented to us by our EDGE subscribers who either come across new documents or see some irregularities in maybe some of the information, because please be advised that the content that is on EDGE goes back for a couple decades. So it is constantly under review and updating. And that's the role of the IESC, to review current information that is presented and validate that information and reach a consensus when it comes to the credential advice. So what you see on the placement recommendations or credential advice is based on a majority consensus reached by members of the IESC. The agenda for today, that would be our next slide, please, will be focusing on a country update on Macedonia. This has been a country profile that has gone through extensive review and update. The author is Alex Popovsky with UCredo in Florida, and my colleague Robert Watkins will be presenting on this country update. And Nigeria focuses on the postgraduate diploma, very fascinating credential with various ways of obtaining it. And my colleague Nancy Katz will be providing you with an overview. Then we will look into our IESC fellowship program, introducing our 2 new fellows, and then the work of our former 2 fellows who completed their research on the offshore medical schools. And if you did not attend the ACRO annual meeting presentation on this, I hope the recording of this webinar is available, because it was an outstanding presentation, very thorough, and made all of us in the IESC really proud of our fellows and the contributions that they've made. Finally, there will be an overview of the International Exam Status Report, and then we will open it up for question and answers. So let's move to our first item on the agenda, which is Macedonia, and I will pass this on to Robert Watkins.
Thank you, Jasmine. First of all, let me reiterate and emphasize what Jasmine did, that that the presentation that Alex did at the ACRO virtual annual meeting was fabulous. And it is available, as you can see on that first slide at the bottom, that bottom bullet, it is available for those who did attend the conference. And so it'll be available for, I believe, another 30 days or within a 30-day time span, and that you can go in and collect that. What this is first of all, as Jasmine mentioned earlier, the EDGE dates back a ways, 15 to 20 years ago, and it was rolled out rapidly. I think those of you that have been to this webinar before have heard me say this on numerous occasions. And there tended to be, the result tended to show the speed with which we acted when we rolled it out. And so what we found ourselves doing over the last 15 years or so is enhancing EDGE, changing things, correcting things, adding things. And so it's not surprising then that we would add things here and there. Sometimes, however, there comes a time when we need to do a complete redo of a profile entry, country entry, or possibly one doesn't exist, such as the case with Palestine, some others, and we're working on those. So what happens then is that we, the IESC, goes out and elicits volunteers to do one of these profiles in toto, or completely redo it. And Alex Popovsky of UCredo agreed to do that for Macedonia, himself a Macedonian. And he did a marvelous job. And so we have just finished on the IESC dealing with it, as you can see there. We dealt with the changes in the education law, which took place in 2007, 2008, which he documents very well in the profile. It included transition to 13 years of primary, secondary education. He came up with 27 credentials for inclusion in there. And we had only about 13 or so. And in fact, I did a recent comparison of those. And it turns out that that he had almost doubled what we had in there already. So it was very welcome, his addition to that. Naturally, to be fair to the previous entry, Alex added something that had not been there, which is the Bologna compliant degree structure, which we'll get into in the next couple of slides. The other thing that was interesting about the credentials, I thought, that was an improvement over what we had. In the previous one, we had the Cyrillic and the English translation. Well, Alex provided that, but he also had the Romanized Macedonian, so that you can, as you'll see in the next slide, as we start getting into credentials, you could actually see the Romanized letter version if you don't read Cyrillic. And believe me, I'm only barely starting to creep around in Cyrillic. Then you'll really appreciate that aspect of it. Again, he researched it all. He then turned it over to us. I served as monitor. And what we do when we have one of these redos or one of these complete new profiles is to assign someone from the IESC to monitor and work with that author. And so I was the one that worked with Alex on that. As he brought it back to us and as the IESC began to grapple with all the work that he had done, particularly the credentials and its advice, and their advice, we also started to ask questions among ourselves about some things that we needed to go back to Alex and ask him about. And Ann Koenig was key in some of those. And the two credential slides that we're going to highlight today, or three actually, Ann was pretty much the one that was moving forward on that, and we got it straightened out with Alex. And so we're real excited that soon this will be in the actually in Edge, replacing in a couple of instances that's there, the overview, the credentials, and in addition to the grading scale as well. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll start pointing out some of the credentials. The first one was the secondary school leaving certificate. While I can read at Macedonian, I certainly can't speak it. But those of you that have dealt with a lot of Eastern European, even Russian credentials will recognize Sredno Obrazovание, which is, of course, secondary education. It comes at 4 years after 4 years of general secondary, generally at a gymnasium, but not exclusively. And the advice then that we gave was that it represents completion of senior high school in the United States. Somewhat straightforwardly, somewhat unsurprisingly, that was pretty straightforward. Then Alex provided us a nice note in there that says, prior to 07-08, one could enroll at university by presenting this, the secondary school leaving certificate, and passing an entrance exam. But from that time, the government introduced a mandatory state maturity examination, and that replaced that entrance exam to universities. So it's less like the SAT, more like, say, the baccalaureate in France, or perhaps Abitur in Germany, things like that. Now, there are other maturity exams that were that resulted from this, because as you all know, dealing with credentials, there are going to be different tracks at the secondary level: vocational, technical, etc. Art, ballet, music is another one in Macedonia. And so Alex talks about that at length, and you can see the comparison when we get it in there of how that might differ from the general secondary school leaving certificate and the exam associated with that. So let's go to the next slide. And the next one, this one is the first pre-Bologna first university degree awarded after 4 to 5 years post-secondary study. And in that the length depended on the discipline that was involved there. Not surprisingly, we indicated that it was comparable to a bachelor's degree. Those of you that are familiar with EDGE, those of you who have been in the field a while and know the thinking behind a lot of what we do, there tends to be the default to year counting. And so we're looking for a first university degree of 4 years or more duration. When it's more, Generally speaking, we still keep it because it's a first degree at a bachelor's comparability. Now that changes with Bologna, but that's another story, and we'll get into that. But basically, that first university degree was considered a bachelor's degree and was offered at the universities before Bologna came along with the education rule law changes in 07, 08. And so we'll have example. That's the other thing that Alex did. It's so great. He has marvelous examples. Usually we have to go find them, but Alex provided them for us. And so we have some nice examples in each of these credentials that he's done. So let's go to the next one, because now we're going to move towards the Bologna compliant degree cycle. And so they will have the ECTS in there so that you know not only how long it is, 3, 4, however many years, but also how many ECTS, because that's so critical. Those of us that know, that are familiar with the Bologna process, know that we can look to that number based on that somewhat static, I won't say rigid, 60 ECTS per year full load, and thus 180 for a 3-year degree, 240 for a 4, and so forth. And as you can see in that third bullet, depending on how long the credential is and how many ECTS are involved, then we sometimes have to split the credential advice so that the same credential, for example, this one, the Diploma for Completed First Cycle of Studies, and just a reminder, Bologna was predicated in the new degree structure on cycles, a first cycle degree that leads to a second cycle degree and that initially in 1999, that was all that they planned. But by 2005, at the ministerial meeting, I think in Brest, they decided that they would add that third cycle to it, the terminal doctoral cycle. But we might then have Diploma for Completed First Cycle Studies, Credential Advice for 180 ECTS, 3 years, and different advice for 4 years, 240 ECTS. So we'll do that, and we'll not have any problems doing it. So be sure when you look at that credential advice that you know you match the one you have on your desk to the one that has either this amount or that amount. And then obviously those that retain the 4-year structure tend to be the science and the STEM fields and so forth. So so that you can expect to see those to be the 240 as opposed to maybe the arts where they're 3 years, 180 and so forth. Teaching degrees in Macedonia remain 4-year programs, so there'll be 240 ECTS. So the way we see educational systems change, don't take anything for absolute granted, all right? Now let's move on to the next slide. There we are. We had issues with the very first slide where we were talking about secondary because of the different tracks and so on. So we got that sorted out with Alex. The other thing that gave us a little bit of trouble that we grappled with in one of our IESC meetings were the law degrees. And that's where Ann Koenig really came into her own, because that's her area of expertise, because ACRO works with the LSAC folks in terms of evaluating overseas legal education. And so she's very familiar with a lot of that, a lot of those degrees around the world. So she was a little concerned that we weren't being clear enough in the various law degrees for Macedonia, so that it will be crystal clear to everyone what is what. Now, what you have is the old pre-Bologna one, Diplomaran Pravnik, 4-year program that was entry level, entered from high school, and it was a 4-year program. And this enabled one to practice law in Macedonia. But then comes the Bologna reforms and the new degree structure. And so what you then have is, unfortunately, the same name, Diplomaran Pravnik, Bachelor of Laws, which is only 3 years, 180 ECTS. And then that particular degree, as you would expect in the Bologna compliant degree structure, has a second cycle, the Magister pro Pravo, which is the Master of Laws, which is LLM, which we abbreviate LLM, and is 120 ECTS more on top of that 180. Now, next bullet is really important. Not all these credentials result in a professional degree that allow for practice of law in Macedonia. First of all, the old one obviously did, okay? Then when you introduce the Bologna compliant degree structure, you suddenly have a first degree that's only 3 years in duration. And that's not sufficient to practice law in Macedonia now. And so you need that Master of Laws, that Magister, 120 ECTS more, 2 years more, 5 total, 300 ECTS total, in order to practice law in Macedonia under that structure. And so that's important to know. Finally, I realize I might be complicating things, but we don't have it on the slide, but there was also the possibility of another title, with another degree with a similar title that did not allow for practice of law. It was an academic degree only, but it'll be clear when we roll this out and you see it in there. Alex does a marvelous job of explaining that and so forth. And next slide. Oh, I think I'm done. So with that, I will turn it over to Nancy Katz.
Thank you, Robert. That was quite extensive. We're going to talk a little bit about the postgraduate diploma from Nigeria. A colleague from an academic institution brought this to our attention, asking us for assistance in how to assess the postgraduate diploma that they were presented with. And what we found and presented for some revision within EDGE is that not all postgraduate diplomas are the same. Some of them do not require a bachelor's degree to be admitted into the program. Some of them are to make up for some undergraduate studies, and some of them indeed are at the graduate level. So they're generally 1 year in length. The most important thing is you need to check to see what the entrance requirement is to the postgraduate diploma. When they use an existing, you need to look, as I said, you need to look at the length. Well, the length is 1 year. You need to look at the admission requirement, the scope, level, and intent. So the level is the admission requirement. The intent is, what does it lead to? It's possible that there's a postgraduate diploma for bachelor degree holders that want to get some specialization in another field of study. So these courses tend to be at the undergraduate level. You can get a postgraduate diploma in education. For example, an individual may have a bachelor's degree in biology, but then they want to teach. So they do a postgraduate diploma in education. The intent is, and the level is at the undergraduate level. Where does it lead to in the home country? For both the scenarios that I just mentioned, if they want to do specialization in another field, such as education, or a biology major wants to study computer science, this will then lead into a master's degree program. They don't get exemption, it's admission into a graduate program. The other scenario could be a higher national diploma holder that wants to go into graduate school, and they generally cannot attend a master's degree program with just an H&D, higher national diploma. So they need to do a year, almost like a bridge program, between the higher national diploma and the master's degree program. We looked at these and we consider these all to be at the undergraduate level. In comparative education, this postgraduate diploma, for example, in education, is similar to a Bachelor of Education in India, where you do a 3-year bachelor's degree and then a 1-year Bachelor of Education degree, and to be eligible to teach as a teacher in the field of study at the 3 years of undergraduate study. I have a degree in comparative education, so I'm always looking at how does this compare to other countries? So this is what we looked at as well. What is the level, scope, and intent of the program? The other possibility is that an individual may be in a master's degree program, and for some reason, they may not complete the master's. They may only do 1 year full-time study. And those are indeed graduate level studies. And they are given this postgraduate diploma because they did not finish the master's. So you really need to see the educational ladder that the individual completed prior to entering this postgraduate diploma. Once again, and you may need to look at every university. If you have postgraduate diplomas from different universities in Nigeria, you should check each university to see what the entrance requirement is to the program and what it leads to at that institution. So we've been talking about this for many months, and we have posted the updates in Acro Edge recently, and we may be continuing to work on it as necessary. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Nancy. Thanks so much. That postgraduate diploma, I mean, it really goes to the rudiments of evaluation 101, doesn't it? Where you have to check to see what are the entrance requirements and the scope of the program. So you just cannot accept it on face value without doing that proper research. And this credential will be posted on the Nigeria country profile. So we'll try and make your work life a little bit easier with the information we've gathered. Thank you, Nancy, for that presentation. All right, let's move on to our fellowship program. As I've mentioned, our former fellows, Rosalie Hancock and Loida Utley, completed their research on the offshore medical schools. This will be also put together into a white paper and will be available soon, a valuable resource for us to have. And I am so excited to introduce to you today our two new fellows, Rebecca Jacob and Haley Klimenage. Rebecca is with Indiana University, Purdue, and Haley is with Algoma University in Canada. They've just joined us. We have not yet fully assigned them our research project, but I do believe, Robert, you're one of the mentors along with Jennifer Mink. Perhaps you'd like to add a couple of words.
Yes, we've had our first orientation meeting with the two, and thanks to Emily and Jen, who'd been prior mentors and had really put the orientation piece together. So we just used that again to introduce them to the position, and I think I'm trying to remember if we finally told them what we had in mind for them. And so we'll save that perhaps for next time, but it's going to be a challenging one. We're still working it out in IESC. In fact, I think at our next meeting, Jasmine, we're going to iron out what it is we want them to do so that they can begin their research and produce that. And let me just say that first of all, they're going to be a fabulous addition to the family of fellows, if you will, now in its third generation. And those prior fellows have done fantastic jobs. Their white papers are posted to the IESC webpage. This one, ultimately, when it's finished, will, like the others, be presented at an ACRO annual meeting, and then an actual printed white paper form that will appear on the IESC website. And so I encourage you to keep an eye open for that. And secondly, I encourage others to be thinking about becoming one of these fellows. It's an 18-month service, and they're involved with all our meetings, which are telephonic. Or virtual, rather. They were telephonic. Now they're by Zoom, so not surprisingly, and they're not expected to contribute, but they're expected to sort of soak up everything that goes on in those deliberations, and then they're ready by the end of the time to make a significant contribution to the field, which is that white paper and that presentation at ACRO annual meetings. So I look forward to it. They're going to be fantastic, and they're going to be given an intriguing topic. Back to you, Jasmine.
Thank you so much, Robert. Yes, I echo what Robert just said about our fellowship program and our past and current fellows. So exciting to have these individuals on board. Well, we're done with our kind of update report. I will pass this forward or back to Melanie.
There we go. Sorry, I was having trouble getting myself unmuted. If you could have the next slide, I think that I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways in which you can get connected with the community. So for those of you who aren't aware, and for the way that we develop some of the questions and the way that we figure out kind of what needs to be updated in all of the education systems or holes in our research is through what we hear from our user community. The International Activity Listserv is a great place to connect with colleagues and discuss credential issues, to ask questions, to ask for resource questions, those sorts of things. And so I would encourage you, if you have not joined the International Activities Research Listserv, to do so. You can find a link to join that at the bottom of just about every EDGE page, I believe. Also, once you've kind of checked with your colleagues on the listserv and done your research and you still don't have a question, you still don't have an answer to a question, or you have found some odd credential that you don't know what to do with, contacting the IESC is another opportunity that you have in order to try to get the answer. Now, I will caveat that is that we do have a large user community and we have a small IESC, so who are volunteers. And so we may not always get to that question right away. And because, as you know, if it's something you've already done some research on, these questions sometimes take a fair amount of research to figure out. So if you need a real quick, immediate answer to something, the better place to go is the listserv. But if you've got a good stumper, we would love to hear from you. Next slide. If you have not had an opportunity to take a look at this, one of our ACRO staffers, content curator, Jonathan Cowin. Jonathan does all of the EDGE updates, like the news alerts. And so he keeps an eye on global news that impacts education and impacts credentials, and post them in the EDGE so that when you have a country that is bookmarked because it's a country that you are particularly interested in, and you get an alert that pops up with news, those are the results most of the time from Jonathan's work. As he's been doing that work this year, he started compiling updates that impact secondary school examinations and university entrance examinations. As we know, in the last year, lots of examinations have been interrupted. They have been delayed, rescheduled, or canceled altogether. And that can cause some challenges for the students that you are trying to recruit. And so Jonathan started compiling a list of those examinations and their current statuses. So this is a list that he is working on. It continues to be updated, and he wanted to share that with this community. And so in the international section of the resources on the ACRO main website, you can find a link to the International Exam Status Report, and you can check it out. So I would encourage you to do so. We've been really, really lucky to have had Jonathan working with us and giving us these news updates, and I would encourage you to check it out. And if you have other information that you think should be included in that resource, Jonathan has encouraged you to go right ahead and email him, and his email address is listed on this slide. And so we hope you'll find this resource valuable. Next slide. And now we are moving to the questions section. And so I am going to go through the Q&A, and if you have a particular question, I'm going to suggest that you pop it into the Q&A section. I have the first question that I will answer right away, which says, do you have to be an ACRO member to be selected as an IESC fellow? So I will say that in general, we like to have folks join ACRO when they join as an IESC fellow. But we would certainly consider an applicant who is not an ACRO member who has a strong background. And what I would hope is that perhaps through that experience of going through the IESC fellowship, if you were chosen, that you might recognize the value of ACRO membership.
Melanie, perhaps we should just to remind people what some of the other parameters, the years of experience, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And if I had that right in front of me, I would be able to be really definitive about it. But the experience, what I can say philosophically is that the years of experience, we are looking for people who are relatively newer to the profession. So to be an IESC fellow, we are looking for someone, am I correct, Jasmine, that it's the first 5 years
Yes.
of your career in
Yes.
international credential evaluation or admissions?
Mhm.
The goal of the fellowship is to introduce people who are in the early stages of their career to the process that experienced evaluators go through in the critical thinking and the research and approach to credential evaluation. And so it really is an incredibly valuable experience, we have heard from our other fellows, to be able to get this foundational training and mentorship actually from seasoned evaluators. And the process of completing a project, a deeper dive research project, is also like an incredible experience and really valuable. For those of you who attended the annual meeting and you did not see the presentation of the fellows' work on offshore medical schools, if you still have access for the next 30 days to get in there and take a look at that presentation. And I would highly recommend that you go back and review it if you missed it, because it was unbelievable. I have to say, I was blown away by the level of research and level of detail that those young women took to approach that project. And that really, I think the work that their mentors, Nancy Katz and Dale Goff, did with them on that project is just incredible. And I think it's going to be an amazing addition to the body of knowledge.
I echo that, Melanie. I'm still gushing on how wonderful that presentation was. And also kudos to Nancy and Dale as their mentors. And that's one of the benefits of being a fellow, because you will be under the kind of mentorship of experienced international credential evaluators and researchers. So
yeah, it's really great. They did an amazing job.
Mm-hmm.
So I have another question and an apology for its randomness. So we may or may not be able to answer this question now, but we'll see. Could you help us understand the credential advice for some credentials with unusual recommendations, like for the Bachelor of Laws from the UK?
Yeah.
The Bachelor of Laws represents attainment of a level of education comparable to a U.S. bachelor's degree with a function comparable to the first professional degree in law in the United States. What does this really mean? There is no bachelor's degree in the U.S. that functions like a professional degree in law. It's too bad Anne's not here.
No, but bravo to the person who asked this question, because you have ESP. This is exactly what IESC is discussing right now, law degrees and the definition of a professional degree in law when we say first professional degree in law. I don't want to jump the gun yet. We are still debating this because we want to make this credential advice a little bit more I guess better with a better description, because we do find that this does give many people pause. I have Nancy and Robert on the panel
Sure.
if they want to
Jasmine,
add.
I'd be glad to jump
Mhm.
in on that, but welcome Nancy's additional input. First of all, I want to take us back to the beginning of EDGE, when it was clear what we wanted to do was to have educational systems around the world. We didn't expect there would be as many as there would be. We thought we could get away with a fewer number than we did, but as many credentials as we could come up with. Initially, we thought in terms of benchmark credentials, something like a high school graduation, something like the first university degree, an advanced university degree, and maybe a terminal university degree with some professional degrees like medicine, law, vet med, dentistry, et cetera, sort of sprinkled in there as well. It soon became evident that we needed to put just about every credential in there because the user base expected it. And so we began to backfill and do that. One of the things when we built the template, and the template was fairly simple. When I say template, I mean, we came up initially with some basic credential advice responses. Anyone that's familiar with the old publications in the days when the National Council on the Evaluation of Foreign Educational Credentials existed, they had what was known as placement recommendations, PRs. And their language was fairly standard. Eligible for graduate admission meant it was a bachelor's and so forth and so on. So we came up with similar kind of language. We wanted to be able to go country to country and say, this degree is comparable to a bachelor's, this is comparable to a master's, a doctorate, and so forth and so on. Now, obviously, when we came across the professions, it became a little dicier because, as everybody out there knows, the US educational system with respect to many professional degrees is very, very different than what you see in other countries. And the questioner here has picked a really good one. The UK LLB, Bachelor of Laws, is a first 3-year bachelor's degree like any other, only it's in the discipline of law. And so in the United States, on the other hand, we require that you have graduated high school and achieved a first degree. I admit technically that you could theoretically get into a law school without a bachelor's with 90 hours and a beautiful GPA and all that. But let's just say a first degree in something, then you go to a law school, you spend a 3-year curriculum and get your JD at the end of it, even though there are those like my son who has one that says that we needn't have 3 years for a JD, but that's another story. Point is that it's a very different structure than what we're seeing out there. So what are we going to call it? Are we going to call it a JD like we call it the bachelor's and the master's for those other credentials? No, we didn't feel we could do that. A 7-year educational sequence in the United States resulting in a credential that, by the way, in and of itself does not allow for professional practice. There's a bar exam to take, et cetera, licensure process. And so could we say that the LLB after 3 years on top of A levels is in fact the exact same thing as a JD? And the answer to that on our part was no. So we came up with a template response to not just law degrees, but we're talking here about law, so I'll stick with that, that we called first professional degree in blank. In this case, the fill in the blank is law, okay? So then it became apparent, so we hoped that users would understand that, oh, this 3-year bachelor's degree from the UK is very much like a JD, because that's what it essentially functioned as in country. And so what we're trying to say there, and our questionnaire has beautifully brought out the two elements of the response to a law degree that trips everybody up, and that is, what is its professional outcome or functionality, and what is the academic equivalence? Because if I see it at the University of Texas, they're not wanting to go to get, to sit the bar exam or something like that. They want to come to my graduate school, presumably in something else, computer science, data science, whatever. So what is the academic equivalent of that JD functional degree? And the answer is, well, we got to come up with something. So what we're doing and grappling with now that Jasmine alluded to is we initially said the template response of first professional degree in law and left it at that. Okay. And then in the note, we would explain that means that they could practice law, sometimes with just the possession of the degree, other times with other steps. Like in the UK, for example, that LLB, they'll have to take a 6-month legal training course to decide on being a solicitor or barrister. And then when they finish that, the exam, then they're able to finally become a practicing attorney. The point is that it's not the same as the US JD. So we had to call it something other than an American JD, but get the point across to you guys, the users, of what it means professionally and in terms of how it compares to our law degree, and then what it means academically in terms of proper placement in the US university structure. And so we struck a compromise. We're grappling now with whether we're going to go back and change some things or do some other things. What is it that we want to say about this? But I'll conclude by saying, in response to our questioner, we're trying to do 2 things here. Number one, tell everybody that Bachelor of Laws is in fact a bachelor's degree from the UK like any other. On the other hand, we're also trying to point out to those who might have other uses or needs or questions to them about this credential and what to do with it, such as a state board, such as a legal bar entity, such as U.S. Immigration's Citizenship and Immigration Service for an H-1B work visa or something like that. What is this? And so that's what our sort of bifurcated, almost confusing answer is meant to do. And we hope finally to erase some of the confusion from that when we finish our deliberations here in the upcoming meeting about what to do with law across the board. And with that, I think I'm done.
Thank you, Robert. That was great.
There's a follow-up question, Robert, and I think you answered it. I was listening, but just the question is, will that be the same case for medical degrees? And what will this be similar or equivalent to?
That's a good question.
Sorry, it was a follow-up question to that. What will this be the same case for medical degrees? What will this be similar or equivalent to?
2 quick answers. One, we don't know. Right now, we're just grappling with law because Ann is such an expert on that we hope to iron that out. And then once we've done that with law, we can then start to compare the others, like the doctor of veterinary medicine, the doctor of dental surgery, the doctor of pharmacy, something that's very different in the United States than it is in other countries and so on, where often the Bachelor of Pharmacy still exists. What are we going to do with this? And how are we going to approach that? So we're still grappling with that, but medicine's the same kind of problem. 4-year bachelor's followed by a 4-year medical experience, earning the MD degree, and then rotations and so forth before one finally is in the hospital practicing medicine in a legal sense. And so it's going to be difficult. I think the use of the term functionally serves, acts functionally like a JD or like an MD is one possibility, but I don't know that really is helpful because we also have to have an academic equivalency here. And so we're just going to have to take these one by one. So yes, medicine will come up and then inevitably the other significant professions after that.
Can I add to that, Robert, and just
Sure.
say that the complexity is also that in regulated professions, we have to contextualize not only the academic value of the degree, but what happens when someone comes here and wants to practice here and get licensed. And you want to balance the academic pieces with the person's ability to function and what is going to be required of them if they want to function here. And so it adds an added layer of complexity with the regulated.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So I don't see any other questions. And so before we wrap up and while people are thinking of other things, I want to ask one other question of the audience, if that's okay. We talked a little bit about the EDGE updates, the news alerts, and I've seen some comments about bookmarks, and that those are both brand new functions of the product in this new iteration. And I really want to know if people are using them and if they like them. And so I am going to go ahead and launch this and ask, are you using the bookmark function in EDGE? So a yes, a no, or I don't know what you're talking about. And are you reading the EDGE alerts in EDGE? Again, a yes, a no, I have no idea what you're talking about. We'll give another moment. It looks like we'll give maybe another 5 seconds. And I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and share the results. And so what these results tell me is I have some work to do. So in terms of using the bookmark function in EDGE, 23% of you say yes, 33% of you say no, and 45% of you don't know what we're talking about. And so this is something that I will need to share and make sure you are aware of. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about it in a minute. And then do you read the EDGE alerts? 45% of you do, that's great. 18% of you don't. Another 38 don't know what we're talking about. So thank you very much for indulging me on that question. And what I will do is maybe at the end, I will pull up EDGE, and the people who are interested can hang out a little bit longer, and I will pull it up. But basically, the bookmarking function gives you the ability to choose countries that you go back to all the time. You know, we all have countries that we see all the time at our institutions, and they're countries that we reference all the time. And after a while, you kind of know what EDGE says about those countries, right? Because you visited the profile 57 times in the last 3 weeks, and you know. But what if something changes and you don't know it, and you don't go back and check because it might have changed, there might have been something new. And so if you bookmark the site, if you bookmark the country, every time there is a substantive update, so a new credential added, Credential Advice revised, new sample documents added, whatever that substantive change was made, you will get a little alert when you log in, and it will say, these are the things that have happened in the profile that you're following since the last time you checked. And so it's a really, really great tool. It's something that I wished I had when I was an evaluator. And so, oh yeah, someone says, oh, yes, from Anna, definitely click the bookmarks. And then also the EDGE alerts are also sort of tied to those bookmarks. We have always wanted to have the ability to share emergent news that's happening in countries that impacts the students' education or their mobility. And so, you know, those countries when, you know, something happens and there's a natural disaster, or there's been a coup and education was interrupted, or there's been some political situation and all of the universities have been closed for a certain period of time. Those kinds of news alerts, as we catch them, get put into Edge alerts. And if you have a country bookmarked and you're following that country, you will get that alert. Or you can just browse the alerts. It could be part of your sort of daily checking in on world news. They're posted every day. Of course, we are not getting everything that's happening in the world, but we're trying to capture the big things. And I think we're doing an okay job at it. So.
Now, Melanie, before we let them go, you still got 5 minutes. Do you want to say a couple of things about the Nathanson research grant and possibly the new courses? Melanie, you need to unmute.
That's weird. I don't know what happened. I didn't realize I was muted. So I want to share with you all that if you are interested in international education research, ACRO has a fund to support that. So we award in the Gloria Nathanson Research Fund for International Education, we have awards of up to $1,000 to support travel expenses, research materials, or other direct costs related to international education research. It is not a difficult application process. We will fund all kinds of topics. If you want to do an EDGE update and you need to do some research, we will fund that through the research grant. If you want to write a white paper on a topic of interest, we can fund that as well. So I urge you to go to the acro.org and check that out. Next slide, please. And long awaited, but we have launched, it says ACRO to launch new on-demand courses. They have been launched. They are available at acro.org today. And if you go to acro.org, there is a tile on the front page that will take you directly to the courses. We have 10 courses available, 2 that are more broad foundations courses, and then another 8 that are a little bit more country specific. They are affordable. They have self-paced stackable modules. They're integrated digital badging. And so once you've completed the course and complete the assessment and pass the assessment, you will get a digital badge that you can add to your LinkedIn profile or to an email signature, and you can share it. And these are the foundation pieces to what will be an extensive series of ACRO International Credential Evaluation credentials. So we look forward to you checking them out. Next slide. If you would like to stay in touch at ACRO, you can join the EDGE email list. You can join the International Activities Listserv, which we talked about earlier, and you can subscribe to the ACRO Connect newsletter, which has much more general news. ACRO Connect articles that are international related appear at the very bottom of the EDGE profile. And I will say, actually, for those of you who didn't know what the emergent news and updates were, in this slide, you can see the picture here. Emergent news are in this blue band, and they're also marked on the map, so you can get a quick scan of what countries have emergent news. And the latest updates are right above them, and those are also marked in the map. But then if you have the country bookmarked, you can see them organized by country as well. And next slide. I think that's it. All right. And we are right about at time. So if anyone would like to stay on, I would be happy to very quickly open up EDGE on my browser, share it, and show you where the bookmarks are. So if you are not interested in that, we can say goodbye and thank you very much. We appreciate you. And I will, in just a moment, get EDGE up and show those of you who haven't seen the bookmarks. I have to log in first. All right, I am sharing screen. It does look like there are a few people who are still here. So they might be interested. So here in the top left is my account. Here is where I can see my bookmarks. And I'm not sure that I bookmarked anything. So I'm going to go to a country right now. Let's see, I'm going to go to Angola. Not probably the best example because there might not be one. But if I want to bookmark that country, I just click here. There's that little kind of fold over piece. It's now bookmarked. And then when I go to my bookmarks, I can see that Angola is bookmarked. And if there are any updates, you will see them. So for example, tomorrow, everyone who has Macedonia bookmarked will get an update that there's been country updates in the Macedonia profile. All of those have been posted, but the updates aren't going to alert until tomorrow. And so you'll get that tomorrow. So I hope that that answered people's questions. Okay, hold on. How do you navigate from here to a listserv? Okay, let me go to the bottom of the Edge page, I believe, is the International Activities listserv. No, it's not there. Sorry, I don't use Edge every day because I don't evaluate anymore. But let's do this. I think from a country. All right, so from a country, again, here's where I would bookmark it. And right here, be a part of the conversation, join the listserv. So on every country page, you can subscribe to the listserv. It takes you directly to the listserv subscription form. So we hope you will join. And it doesn't look like I have any other questions. So I am going to say thank you very much. Oh, wait, Rosa, where do you see the notifications? So you see the notifications for the places where you bookmarked if you go to My Bookmarks. And then you can just check to see what has been updated since you were there. Okay. Thank you all very much. Oh, wait, one more chat question. Thank you. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much. I hope to see you again next month.